Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today, this afternoon, for the second of our Adventures in Montessori. And then we will talk about the continuity in environment, materials, and lessons. Then we'll be talking specifically about Montessori lessons in math and the cultural curriculum focusing on time and what it looks like in all of our programs. And then we'll have some time for questions at the end. So with that, I'm going to introduce our head of school, Miss Margie Carroll, and then she is going to introduce the rest of our teachers.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. We're really glad you're here. We know that as parents, you care a lot about what's happening inside the classrooms. Unfortunately, right now it's hard for you to come in and see what's happening there. So we're really happy that you're here to join and learn about Montessori. Those of us who are either teachers or administrators here became intrigued by the Montessori approach to teaching and learning, either recently or a long time ago. And it's still fascinating for us. And we hope that during this presentation, you can learn a little bit about it and maybe pick up a little bit about why it's so important and why we believe so strongly in what we do, and that you will get excited about it as well. I want to introduce our teachers who are here today. So each of whom you'll be hearing from. So Ms. Cheryl Lamongo, she's a teacher in the preschool Lanai classroom. She's worked for us for a long time, but only recently got her Montessori credential and was mentored by one of our senior teachers. I'm really excited that she's going to be presenting today. Tiffany Wong also teaches in the preschool program in the Little House and been with us for a number of years. And Cindy Shine, who teaches in the lower elementary and has been a Montessori teacher, I believe, for about 20 years here at MCS for a very long time. So we're really excited that the three of them are presenting. Some of you may have them as your classroom teachers. And then I'm going to be throwing in a little bit about the upper elementary program as well. I taught myself in lower elementary for 5 years and taught upper L for 8 years before I started getting into administration. So you'll hear from all of us today. One of the things that we really want to emphasize, and you will hear about as we go through the day this afternoon, is about the continuity of the Montessori approach in any authentic Montessori program, from the 2-year-old program all the way through elementary or middle or high school, even in some schools. It's one of the hallmarks of a Montessori program that there is this continuity. It happens with the materials, it happens with the training of the teachers, it happens with the multi-age classrooms, that there is this continuity, and it should be present if you're looking for an authentic program. The photos that you are looking at here have to do with the classroom shelves, and each classroom is arranged essentially the same way, according to their content areas, such as language or math or geography or sensorial materials. It may not be very evident to somebody who is not familiar with Montessori, but each section of the classroom and each material is designed for a specific purpose. Montessori materials are made of natural materials such as wood or glass or metal or ceramics. And we trust our children to use them carefully. They're experienced their teachers showing them how to do so that they don't break and don't damage, and take the care of the material so that they themselves can use it whenever they choose, or their comrades can also use the materials. It's part of the learning that they have, that they take out materials and they put them away knowing that they're there for themselves and for the whole community. One of the aspects of Montessori materials too is that there's what's called a built-in control of error so that children discover for themselves when they've done something wrong. So on a very obvious level, if you look in the picture of the preschool, if they're putting together a puzzle, one of the wooden continent puzzles or the country puzzles that involve wood, is the material doesn't fit together if it's not done correctly. And this happens over and over again with other materials as well, with math and language and so on. So there's what's a built-in control of error so that they discover for themselves and can find out why something hasn't worked out. And you'll see more of that as we go on. Lessons are given in small groups. So in the 2-year-old program or in the preschool program, children meet in very small groups, either one-on-one with the classroom teacher or on occasion with those youngest ones with two students, mostly because children of that age are not interested in what the other student is learning or not learning. It's all about them. They're very self-absorbed, and I don't mean that to be that they're unkind, but it's all about them. They want to touch, they want to feel it. They don't really have patience to wait for 6 or 7 other children to get their hands on it. So they get the lesson and then they're able to use it right away. In the lower elementary and the upper elementary, those groups are organized a little bit differently, but still in small groups, either by grade level. So in lower elementary, perhaps a 1st grade group has a lesson with the teacher, or a 2nd or a 3rd grade group, or organized by ability level or interest level. So it changes a little bit from the youngest of children to the upper elementary, but they're still in small groups because of this vast range of age in the multi-age classroom or ability level, as I said a few minutes ago. There are some lessons, science lessons, for example, in the elementary that are given to the whole group according to a 3-year cycle in the rotation of the curriculum so that they cover all the areas that are important for learning. But then the follow-up work or the follow-up lessons are given to a smaller group according to their age or ability level. So still there's continuity according to age or ability throughout the program from the 2-year-olds all the way up through upper elementary. And it's really important that students get their hands on the materials. Maria Montessori talked about the connection between the hand and the brain and the neural pathway that develops and becomes, helps the child to learn and make a stronger connection and understanding of a concept by doing it, by experiencing it, and by doing it repeatedly. Children doing, just say long division, for example, if they do it over and over again with material, that concept becomes much more embedded, much better embedded. It's cemented in their brain in a way that it doesn't have that opportunity to do if it's only done abstractly. There's been studies about that, about the importance of that hand to brain connection, which is really fascinating. Because of that continuity as well, if you can imagine that the preschool children are going to advance to a lower elementary at some point, and then lower elementary to upper elementary, because of that continuity in arrangement of materials, and the style, the nature of how the lessons are given, what the expectations are, there's really seamless transition for those students going from one level to another. They can't wait. I'm right now doing check-in for the preschool classrooms, and the kindergartners are imagining what it's going to be like when they get to lower elementary, and they're so excited. Some of them have siblings in the lower elementary, and they can't wait to get there. And what they're going to find when they get there is that those principles of materials on the shelves, the use of materials, the small group lessons, all of those things that they're accustomed to from one level transitions really well to the next, and it helps them to be successful when they get there. All right, So we've got a lot to cover when it comes to specifically the curriculum. So we are going to move now to turn it over to Miss Tiffany, who's going to talk about math in the preschool and kindergarten program.
Hi, everyone. Aloha. I am Miss Tiffany, and I will be discussing a few of our Montessori math activities. So the first activity that I'm going to introduce to you is the spindle boxes. And the spindle boxes are one of our beginning math activities in the 3 to 6-year-old program. This activity helps the child to associate numerals and quantities. The spindle box has 2 separate trays, wooden trays with little compartments. So the first one is from 0 to 4, and the second one is from 5 to 9. And there is another wooden tray that holds 45 wooden spindles, which is exactly enough spindles needed to place into the boxes. So starting, as you see the child in the picture, starting from left to right, beginning with 0, the child gathers as many sticks needed to match the numerals on the board. And the children will learn that the number 0 means empty. Therefore, that compartment would not have any spindles placed inside. So as the child continues to count and gather spindles in their hands, they can really feel the difference between 2 spindles or 9 spindles, which really helps them to reinforce their understanding of numerals and quantities. So next, we will be talking about the Introduction to Golden Beads activity. The Introduction to Golden Beads helps the child begin learning about place value and the decimal system. So in the first lesson, we will introduce the child to what a unit is, which is 1 bead, starting from left to right. We then give it to the child to feel, name it, and place it on the left side of the mat. And next, we introduce the child to the 10 bar. As you can see in the second picture, there is the 10 bar. The child will then place the 10 bar vertically on the left side of the unit and then count the beads, 1 through 10. And then we repeat the same step for the 100 square as well as the 1000 cube. And notice the color scheme of the mat. The 1's place is green, the 10's place is blue, and the 100's place is red, and the 1000's place is green. And keep in mind that this color scheme is something that remains in the Montessori math materials throughout elementary. And the numeral cards can be added to the lesson once the child shows readiness to make the connection between the numerals and quantity. All right, and so the next lesson, well, actually the last lesson that I will be talking about today is the equivalence tray, also known as the crisis of 9. So when introducing the activity to the child for the first time, we begin by counting the units from the tray, bringing each one to the mat and placing them on a vertical line close together. And then the teacher would explain to the child that the 10 units are as same as the 10's bar and that we have to move it to another place, the 10's place. We continue to use the same approach with the 100's place. 10 bars are equivalent to 100 square. And with the 1000's place, 10 squares are equivalent to 1000 cube. As we continue with our presentation, you will see that the 3 to 6 math lessons really help to lay the groundwork and foundation for higher math activities in the elementary program.
Okay, thanks, Tiffany. So I'm Miss Cindy. I'm in the lower elementary program. So aloha and welcome to your Golden Bead addition lesson. So the golden beads are one of the concrete materials that help us teach the math concepts. On your screen, you can see the numeral cards laid out, the golden bead material at the top, okay, and the addition problem written on paper. If you look at the numeral cards, they continue the color identification that you saw in the preschool lesson. Units are green, tens are blue, hundreds are red, and units of thousands are green. So the first number in the problem, also called the addend, is created with the numeral cards. On the first photo on your screen there, 2,456. Okay. Then we expand the large number into individual place value. You can see 6 units, 50, 400, okay, and then the hand is covering up the 2,000. Okay. Next, we represent the number with the golden bead material. You can see the process in a speedy video in just a minute here. So we have 6 units, okay, 5 tens, which is a 10 bar, 400, which is 4 squares, and then 2 thousands, which is 1,000 cubed. Okay, so this next photo shows the second addend, 4,125. Okay, so just like the first addend, we expand or break apart the number and then lay out the golden bead material. So there the number is expanded to each place value, and then we lay out the golden bead material. Okay, so in that first photo, both addends have now been laid out, and now we bring the numbers together. So we're starting with the units, we bring all the loose beads down, okay, past the equals line. You can see the red equals line. Then we count, there are 11 beads. Okay, we are looking for 10, so we count again. When we get to 10, we exchange the 10 loose beads for a fixed 10 bar, okay, which you can see right there. Then we carry the 10 bar above to the tens place because every number has its place. Okay. So that's in that first photo. You can see above the 50, there's one 10 bar. Okay. Then we bring together all the tens and add them together. We do the same for the hundreds and the thousands. Okay. So we have our final answer represented with the golden bead material. The students then retrieve the numbers that represent these quantities of golden beads. So taken from the numeral cards, starting with the units, we have 1 unit, 8 tens or 80, 5 hundreds, and 6 thousands. Then our final step is to bring the numeral cards together to create the sum, 6,581. Then if you notice the paper on the right, there's another way the students can use the addition. They'll write the problem down on this paper also. So then the next slide shows our transition from the golden bead material to the stamp game, another concrete material. But you'll have to wait till your next visit to see how the stamp game works.
Okay, so in the upper elementary, so what's called the 4th, 5th, and 6th grade group, they also use the golden bead materials. They also will use the stamp game materials for their math learning as well. So we're going to look now at a lesson that involves multiplication of two-digit numbers. And the students are learning how to lay out the golden beads and check their work using the material. So I talked to you earlier about that control of error, and Tiffany also referenced it when she was talking about the spindle boxes, and there's only the exact number of spindle sticks to satisfy the lesson. So if they don't come out quite right, they'll know that they've done something wrong and they'll have to think about it and fix it. So we're going to watch a video now. It's kind of a long video, but we're going to stop at about 3 minutes time, and we'll talk a little bit more about what we've seen. So let's run the video.
Today we're going to look at 43 times 25. Okay, and when we have a 2-digit, sometimes sum, we have to do something, we call it expand. So we're going to expand. What number is in the tens place in 43? Alex? Can you say it? 4. Okay, so this would be 40 plus, what number's in the units? 3. Okay, so we have 40 plus 3 times, okay, what number's in the tens place in 25? 2, so what do you think I would write here? 20 plus 5. Okay, what would we do first? Okay, so we would do. Okay, but before we write any more, I want to show you how I can build this. Okay, because actually we're not going to do 40 times 20 first. Okay, so first I'm going to say, how many is in each of these? 100, right? This is 10 by 10, so 100. Okay, so I'm going to just build in a square. Now I have 40, so I have to have 10, 20, each of these is I'm gonna have 4 rows because I have 40. And then you said 40 times 20, so how many do you think I should go down? 2. Okay, so I go 4 across because I had 40, and then 2 down because I had 20. Okay, so we said 40 times 20, and then what would we do next? 3 times 20. Okay, and then what would we do next?
40 times 5.
40 times 5 plus
I just need to go like 3 plus 5.
3. Oh, sorry, 3 times 5, yeah. 3 times 20. So here's our 20 row. Okay, so we said 3 times 20, so I need to give this one 3. And I need to give this one 3. Okay. And then I said 40 times 5, so how many do you think each one will get? 5. The 3 times 5. So I'm going to put it in this little box because these are these little pieces and they're hard to keep still. So look, here I have, so you want to follow these rows. Here I have 3 and here I have 5. Okay, so I'm going to build 3 rows of 5. Okay, now let's do the math. What's 40 times 20? 800. Okay, so we're going to do the math underneath here. Look here. Let's count. Let's count how many we laid out. Okay, 100, 200, oh, are we right?
Yes.
Yes. So now let's look at 3 times 20. So these are 3 times 20.
60.
What's 3 times 20? I heard it.
60.
60. Okay, let's look here. Count with me. 10, 30, 40, 50, 60. So were we right? Yeah. So now let's look down here. This was our 40, so 40 here times 5. Okay, so 40 times 5 is 200. So let's count and see if we're right. So let's count by tens. 10, 30, 40, 50. Were we correct?
Yes.
And then what's 3 times 5?
15.
15.
The smallest number.
Okay, and then if you look here, let's count our little beads. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So were we right?
Yes.
So now what do we have to do with all these numbers?
You add them.
You add them.
Okay, so I just want to mention a couple of things about this. First of all, I was never very good at math. I kind of grew up a long time ago. And I never had manipulatives. I never even had, I don't believe, any illustrations to show what 40 3 times 25 was. And I was never very good at it. And I had a really hard time understanding and making the leap to abstraction. So when I saw this for the first time, when I was learning about Montessori, I was like, ta-da! I finally understood all kinds of things having to do with math and geometry, especially. I was just a disaster in geometry, but I learned to love geometry when I learned it in Montessori. I mean, it was like light bulb moments going off for me. And one of the reasons why I became so intrigued with the Montessori approach. So as I said, when the students do this work, you're seeing the teacher give the lesson here because we want you to see how the lesson goes. But when the children are doing it, what to follow up with a lesson like this or one of the other lessons that you saw earlier, the teacher gives them basically an assignment and says, okay, you've got 5 or 10 of these kind of problems that you need to do. And maybe she gives a lesson on Monday to the small group of math students in, I believe this would be probably a 5th grade lesson, I think. And it'll be due on Friday. And so during that time when they're not in a lesson with the teacher, they would have this lesson as well as a number of other lessons that they need to follow up and do the work on. And during that independent work time, when the teacher is giving lessons to other groups, the students are working independently to do the follow-up work that they're expected to do. So there's this constant movement between receiving the lesson and then doing the follow-up work, whether it's in math or language or history or geography or the range of curriculum that the students have been given lessons about. And as you saw here, the materials themselves provide that control of error. So if a problem doesn't come out right, they think, this really didn't work. Let me set this up again and start over. Oftentimes too, in a lesson like this or with follow-up work like this, students work with 1 or 2 or 3 other students to do the work. And so they're kind of checking each other to see if they're setting it up correctly. And of course, if students, once students master a concept, they move on to the next one, either again with the whole group, or if they're more advanced, they can get a more advanced lesson one-on-one with a teacher, or if they need support, they might practice more often or take longer to absorb that material until they completely understand it. And then as Miss Cindy was just showing you, after they do the work with the materials, they write it on paper, which is that level of abstraction. Oftentimes their math in their notebooks is accompanied by an illustration. So it goes from manipulative material to illustrating the work and then showing it abstractly represented by the numbers, by the Arabic numerals. Okay. I think we're ready to go on now to the cultural lessons where we're going to be focusing on time, the idea of time and history.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ms. Cheryl. I'm a preschool and kindergarten teacher in the alumni class. So in Montessori classrooms, we have a very unique way of celebrating children's birthdays, and we call it the sun ceremony. And it focuses on the concept of time while honoring each child on his or her birthday. In a picture, notice that on the floor is a globe and a candle in the center representing the sun. Around the sun are little labels of the months of the year. The teacher begins the sun ceremony by sharing highlights or milestones of the child's years of life, telling a story of the child's life so far. The child starts walking around the sun, starting at his or her birthday month, carrying the earth and circling the sun one time, representing each year of life. The whole class sings a special song about the earth going around the sun, and this process is repeated until the child's current age, and the whole class can sing a happy birthday song at the end. The child may make a wish and blow out the candle. What's so special about the sun ceremony is that it introduces the idea of passage of time first through concrete materials. As you can see, a child is holding a globe and circles the sun, the candle, one time marking 1 year. Just like the math lesson, there is a concrete representation of the sun. And note in the picture, you can see we have the child is placing little the golden beads on a holder. Each bead placed on a holder represents a year. And not all the classrooms do the sun ceremony the same. We all do it differently, but the idea of using concrete materials is very evident with the globe and the candle is the sun. Thank you.
Okay, so now we're going to go into the culture for the lower elementaries. In the Montessori approach, storytelling of the great lessons is used to integrate the studies of geology, geography, physical and life sciences, anthropology, and history. So beginning with the creation of the universe and our solar system, students explore the development of the life on Earth and human history using timelines, books, and objects throughout their elementary years. The timeline of life, which you see here in this photo, provides an opportunity for the lower elementary students to learn about the development of and the interconnectedness of living things on Earth. Each subsequent timeline picks up where the last one left off, eventually leading to our present time. So after many experiences with timelines, okay, our second graders create a personal timeline. The students choose one photo from each year of their life. They write descriptive information about the photos, they edit their writing, then organize and sequence the photos, which you can see on your screen. The personal timeline helps the children see their place in the world and gives the students a sense of their own history. All right, thank you.
Okay. All right, back to me. So what I want to emphasize about the continuity between the preschool and the elementary is the use of materials again to demonstrate the idea of time passing. And in the beginning, of course, they're learning about it because they're circling the sun in the sun ceremony. And then later they begin to use timelines, these long, extensive, huge materials that get laid out in the classroom, and they can see with the pictures and the dates that are given for different eras, the Mesozoic and Neozoic eras and so on that timeline of life, that time has passed. And in the timeline that you saw at the beginning that Miss Cindy was just talking about, at the end of that timeline of life, that one that you see there in the picture, on the very far end, which you can't actually see right now, there's a little sliver of time that's represented in red. It's a little tiny sliver, which represents the advent of humans. And it represents both, so each of these timelines, they're designed with actually, the relative time of each period sort of calculated so that you can see, oh, this period lasted way longer than another period of time lasted. And so this little sliver of human time at the end represents, well, compared to the rest of life and the development of life on Earth, humans have only been here for a little sliver of time. So that's in there and it's embedded in that material. What happens with the some part of the lower elementary and then as well as in the upper elementary is that those slivers that are at the end of each timeline that they use, they use that to sort of stretch out that period. So that red little sliver that was on that timeline of life, the next timeline is of the advent of early humans. And there's a timeline, and the whole thing is just a strip of band across the top, and it's all red, which means, oh, this is humans. This is the coming of humans on the earth. And then again, there's like slices of it, and each part represents some different era of early human history. And then those are followed up by a variety of other timelines. There's the AD, BC, or these days the BC AD timeline, which now are the BCE, before the Common Era and after the Common Era timelines that are used. And again, these are very long, sometimes using ribbons and colors and labels. And then this one in particular is about ancient civilizations. And you can see across the top, the dates are there, and then across on the y-axis basically is on the continents. So Asia, Europe, and so on. And when the early civilizations developed, and then at some point you can see where one civilization sort of takes over another one, and like the Romans, stretching out their domain and so on, and how long those each lasted. And then again, going up to now, more contemporary times, they can see, oh, it's just a little sliver. There was a huge amount of time that passed long before us, so that they get this perspective on all of that. With the lower elementary classroom, as Miss Cindy was talking about, that lesson was given to the younger children in the lower elementary, and at that time they start to develop, and the teachers are teaching research skills. So they get the whole timeline, impressionistic experience of working with the timeline and laying out cards and so on. And then it's followed up by research. So a child might, for example, with that timeline, decide that they want to learn about the trilobites, which are like really, really early form of life. Or maybe they're going to learn about, I don't know, fish, some kind of fish, for example. And so they start to develop research skills, and there's lessons given on how to do research. And in the classroom, there's books about maybe trilobites or about fish or whatever it is. And they write a report about that. So they're getting the idea of time and history and evolution, but they're also learning some skills for doing research and how to do that independently, which transitions also into the upper elementary. The timelines really also graphically represent an idea in Montessori, which is a concept in Montessori, which is emphasized across the curriculum, no matter what age they're at. And that is the idea of the whole thing, and the parts of the thing. And it could be a timeline, it could be about an animal, the animal kingdom. So one of the principles of Montessori is that we always start with the big idea, the big concept. What are we talking about? To impress the children, and usually it's quite dramatic, it's quite visual, there's a lot of materials that the kids are using to spark their interest. And I kind of think about it, this whole to part idea of, as now adults, if we go to a museum, for example, an art museum, let's say, when you walk into the museum, it's huge. It's a big thing. It's a big idea. It's pretty impressive. It's kind of dramatic. It's beautiful. It has color, whatever it is that attracts us to go there. But once we get there, we want to know, oh, where do I go next? And so we need a map. We need a diagram. And the diagram shows us, well, in this gallery, you'll see this, and in that gallery, you'll see that, and in this gallery, you'll see that. And then depending on your interest, you're going to go to that gallery. You're going to see, I don't know, Renaissance art, I don't know, whatever, or history of the or art from the Middle Ages, or art from China, whatever. you pick that thing that you're interested in and you go there. And the only reason you go there is that first you have this vision of the whole, and then you go to the part that is attractive to you or that you need to learn more about. And this is the idea with Montessori materials, is the idea of whole to part. We give the idea of the whole universe, and then we break that down into the solar system, and then we break that down into the planets, and then we break that down into studying the earth, and then we look at the earth and we look at, oh, what does the earth look like? It's made up of continents. Oh, what are each of the continents? And it's, so we start whole to part and we break it apart. And this is an idea that is true from the youngest age to the older age. We always start with this, and to me, it just makes so much sense. I wound up being a history major when I was in college, and I wished I had had these timelines. Again, Montessori intrigued me from the moment I was introduced to it. And the idea of history, I wish I had seen it this way when I was a kid, because I could never figure out when, you know, when was the Middle Ages relative to the French Revolution or to ancient Chinese history. I had no idea of it. Seeing things visually like this, with this big timeline, would have helped me to understand it. And I think that with our children, when they're seeing it at this age, working with it, manipulating it, doing the research on the part that they've learned about that whole, helps them to put perspective on all sorts of subjects. And again, is one of those really key elements, I think, of continuity from one program level to another.
The students have both in the elementary program. So a lot of the work is done on the floor on mats. So you have your area distinguished by your mat. But we do have some individual desks and like a low table. So students can choose, like if they want to work at a desk or if they want to work on the floor. And also the work or the jobs. Sometimes it's a big job that needs more floor space, so it has to be done on the floor. And other jobs that are smaller, or if it's like just a writing assignment, then you can do it in your desk. So the students could actually flow through a desk or onto the mat, depending on the work that they're doing. For writing assignments, we do recommend like working at a table, like if you're just working on handwriting or like a journal writing, because you do want your arm supported. But with the other jobs, like when you're manipulating the materials, the mats are fine, and writing on the ground is fine too. The idea is that you're having all those multiple experiences with the touching, and then also, you know, feeling, and then writing. And so I don't think any of the kids really complain about their backs. That happens to us teachers.
You know, usually the children from the 3 to 6 program really transition smoothly, especially if they're entering into traditional education after the 3 to 6 program. It seems to be a smooth transition. I think that children have a good foundation of the materials and of the concepts, that they're able to transfer it to the general and traditional education. So all of our students have really transitioned well. You know, we hear back from the parents and they have, you know, good things to say. They feel their child was well prepared for the next step in their education. So, yeah.
Miss Cindy, do you have anything to add to that?
Not too much. It's just that, I mean, we're using the numbers, the same thing, addition, subtraction, multiplication. And so just with the materials, you have more experiences, more connections made. And then from what we have heard from families, the students have done fine transitioning to a more traditional environment.
Yeah, we would, you know, really encourage families to what we call complete the cycle, just because at the period of kindergarten, the kindergarten year in the preschool and kindergarten program, the children are just starting to think more abstractly. So, they're having these experiences with the hands-on learning materials. And so we see the transition to elementary, our elementary program, pretty seamless because they're continuing to use those materials. But if they do leave anytime before the end of a cycle, there would be some transition, just because it is going to be a little bit different in terms of how they're going to be learning in a more traditional learning environment.
So in first grade, the students begin a coding lesson, and it's usually been once a week, and they're on an iPad. And so they're using just to use the iPad to kind of familiarizing themselves with that. And throughout the lower elementary, that's how we use the iPads. And then in upper elementary, since they've had this good base of knowledge now with the iPads, they can use the iPads more for research and doing presentations. So it's kind of woven in to the fabric of the Montessori environment, along with the concrete materials are continued to be used. So it's a nice addition, actually, to the program.
Yeah, I just want to add on to that what Cindy just said. So the lower elementary are strictly being introduced to technology for coding. But in the upper elementary, they're starting to learn, and they practice with, just using a keyboard, practicing on how to use a keyboard. But they learn first with using a desktop in the 4th grade, and then they use Mac or laptop in the 5th grade, and then they start to use even more deeply an iPad. And at each level, so for all of those lessons, we have a specialist. We have an IT specialist, Mr. Bob, who teaches those classes, and they go to Mr. Bob to get the lessons. But as Miss Cindy said, they then can use them in the classroom if it applies to some other area of the work that they're doing. So if they're doing research, for example, on that timeline of life, they might use the device for their research. So there is a real integration between the two, but mostly we're not teaching about math. For example, we don't teach about math using a device. We teach about math using the Montessori materials or those concrete materials like we just showed you. There may be some opportunity for them to practice like math skills or something like that, but we don't teach about that subject using technology. But the technology is used on occasion, depending on what they're learning, to further their learning about it.
And
I hope that helps.
technology wasn't around when Maria Montessori lived, so we really had to think about when it is most appropriate to introduce this use of technology. And based on what we know in terms of child development, that young children are so concrete in their thinking, as they move towards abstraction, it really does seem more appropriate for them to be introduced to it when they are in that second plane of development. And I think as parents, sometimes some parents are worried that if you don't introduce technology to your child young, then they're going to be behind their peers. But we know that they catch on really quickly, but that strong foundation that they need in the understanding of concepts, is what they're going to get by using the hands-on learning materials. So, and we've seen it, with our graduates, that they are definitely not behind. They are introduced to it when they're ready, and that's that sensitive periods, that Maria Montessori believed in, that the children are ready, for that abstract thinking in elementary.
So the mixed age group, so some of it, what happens is you have observation, like if we're giving a lesson to the older students, and the younger students are observing, and they're kind of learning in that way also. And then like if a student needs like, we've moved them up to a different lesson and it's like, they're not really catching on to this. We can kind of go back to another lesson, an easier lesson and make that foundation stronger and then go forward to our new lesson. And so sometimes the students can help each other, which is great with the mixed aged environment. We have older students helping the younger students read. Sometimes we have the younger students helping the older students. So it's really a great kind of give and take. And it's also nice because they can see what they're looking forward to. Like if the older students are getting a fraction lesson, then other years, I remember like the first graders, when they become that age to have the fraction lesson, they're like, oh, I remember the second graders getting this lesson last year. And so it's kind of fun for they're like, oh, now it's our turn. So they get to really kind of work together with the ages and they help each other. And I think that's how it kind of works with the Montessori. So I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, and I think another really nice thing about just our school of being ages 2 up through elementary grade 6 is that before COVID, our elementary students actually had more interactions with the other programs. So we did have something called reading buddies. And so the elementary students would go to other classrooms, like the 2-year-old classroom or the preschool and kindergarten classroom, and they would read a story to the younger children. It would help, with their reading aloud skills. The younger children would love, having these visitors come from that foreign place over there, that elementary program. And so it really helped to build, that sense of community and also the responsibility that the elementary children had, to being leaders, not only within their classroom, but to the other younger programs as well. So, that was a really nice thing that we used to do prior to COVID. And we certainly hope once all of this is over, that it's something that we can reinstate because it really is meaningful to both, the older children as well as the younger ones. So, all right. Take care, everyone. Thank you so much. We will be holding our final Adventures in Montessori in February, which is really like around the corner, but we'll be talking about other lessons because there are so many other lessons in the Montessori classroom. So we hope you can join us for that as well.